Teegan.
I'm David.
And today we're going to talk about interviewing in sports journalism.
So I'm going to set the scene here with a little attention grabber. Imagine this. There's a basketball team, they're in a championship game, and there's a few seconds remaining. So they drop a play, they execute it, and guess what? They score. They win. Big deal, celebration. What's going to happen next besides the celebration, maybe confetti falling if it's that serious? There's going to be an interview. Someone's going to be on that court interviewing the star player who made the game-changing shot, and it might be you. Interviewing is a critical skill in this industry of sports journalism, and that's the topic for our training module here, is conducting interviews. It's a critical skill, and in talking about interviews, we have a few subtopics here. We'll be talking about how to ask questions, create a comfortable atmosphere, taking notes during your interview, dressing professionally, and listening.
So next, heading in, since one of our subtopics is asking questions, we can see the uncertainty reduction theory here with Berger and Calabrese, which basically the uncertainty reduction theory just talks about how we're able to ask questions to create a more enjoyable experience, being able to generate better quality conversation and answers, and helps break that ice within an interaction. The main thing about uncertainty reduction theory is that every person is going to go into an experience, conversation, interaction with a little bit of unease, and you're not always sure how it's going to go. Every person experiences it totally normal, hence why they created a theory about it. So how can we apply this in our field? We can adjust our nonverbals and reading the other person and environment that you're in. Keeping the interview with questions like super direct and quick also helps keep that icebreaker pretty thin, because if you're staying there getting personal or asking super long questions, again, can make that uncomfortable tension even more. You also want to keep a high energy when you're in this environment. Keeping your energy up and encouraging positive responses and questions for the other involved as well also helps ease that tension, makes the interview go a little bit better and everything. And then heading into where we could see this in our career field, each time we interview, there's a high chance we've never spoken to this person before, especially since March Madness just happened. Put yourself in that situation. You're watching a player, they win. Caitlin Clark, for example, you've probably never talked to her before, but everyone knows who she is. So being able just to make yourself seem like you know each other also helps there. So with this interview, the whole purpose is not only understanding the person, but also writing to the public about it as well. Because it's great that you interviewed that person, but you need to get good quality content that you can rewrite and then produce to the public to show what actually happened at that event. Continuing on with uncertainty reduction theory, just so you can apply it more to your life and understand, because sometimes just talking about other people doesn't necessarily give us that in-person example for ourselves. So a scenario here, you just graduated with a degree, and it could be any degree or it could be any scenario, but this one was just probably the easiest since this is a college level course. And you're probably thinking, how am I feeling right now? I'm excited, I'm nervous, I just got my degree, I'm looking forward to new things. However, now I have to get a job. This past 4 years I've been studying, doing homework at school, been in a similar environment since high school, but now, again, you have that unnerve because now you're heading into adulthood. So now, like I said, it's time to start looking for a job. Now, take a moment about how you would feel. Approach your new career and what you may anticipate of others. Now, at this point, you may not even realize it, but you are experiencing some form of uncertainty reduction theory because, again, you're still feeling that super uneasy feeling. Where should I apply to? What should I expect? Like, am I going to be able to interview good? And then once you've done that, do you see comparisons of this theory in your own life? Again, just apply it to yourself. It may be for a new job, a relationship, a friendship. You're going to just feel that, oh my gosh, what could happen next feeling. We talked about uncertainty reduction theory. One of our next subtopics is going to be creating a comfortable atmosphere. So within a comfortable atmosphere, we're going to see a lot of nonverbals here. Now, our nonverbals can help us create a comfortable atmosphere more than spoken words can. And before I go into these, and some of them are quite difficult to pronounce, nonverbals just basically mean any type of thing that isn't words, hence of what I said. Now, in a couple other slides, you're going to see more specific, but these are just like the different categories of it. So first we have haptics, which is using touch, handshakes, shoulder touches to show welcoming and creating a sense of connection. Next, we can head into kinesics, which is using body language. facing the person, arms down, comfortable in position. This is usually like a pretty comfortable stance talking to someone. We also have open and closed positions. A closed position might look something like this when you're talking to someone. Open's more welcoming, an arm's out there. Now again, sometimes these also have more feminine versus a masculine style, but they're also very interchangeable. Next we have facial expressions. Usually we see smiling, a lifted face when speaking to another person. This is critical in an interview because if you look mean and angry, you're probably not going to get the best content out of the athlete or whoever it may be, a coach. So if you have that welcoming, very open energy to you, again with the high energy, you're probably going to get a better interaction with them. Hence why the nonverbals can be so critical in an interview. Next we have, how do you say it? Oculosis. We're probably going to go back and fix that. But this is just maintaining eye contact without seeming too intimidating. So again, keeping eye contact with who you're talking to, but not having a staring face, a resting face, or just very like angry towards the person. And finally, we have proximity. This is super big, and we saw proximity very much go to the wayside during COVID, which I know that seems kind of weird topic to bring up, but in interviewing in COVID, you, again, lost so much of that interpersonal connection because proximity is basically how close you're staying to the person when you're talking to them. So a personal approach would be 18 to 4 feet to show closeness, wanting to connect through a conversation, but without being too in their personal bubble, but not also being too far away, which showing disinterest or uncomfortability. So just some examples of some nonverbals, so maybe you can apply this a little bit closer, and without the difficult wording of what the nonverbals actually are. Maybe your first time meeting someone, a handshake, a hug, hi, how are you, nice to meet you. Now that's verbal, but still when you're doing that, the hi, how are you, high five, whatever that may be. Sometimes when you start to develop that more interpersonal relationship, maybe seeing someone outside of class, a smile, a wave, a head nod, etc. Again, just like showing that you have that connection with them, but without having to verbally say something. Sometimes our nonverbals actually show more caringness and connection than words can ever be, because sometimes people take wording the wrong way, especially when it comes to tone. Hanging out with someone you may be interested in, friendship or relationship. Again, this is a little bit more specific. If we keep it more towards interviewing, you're probably not going to have either a friendship or relationship. However, sometimes you do develop a relationship, especially if it's with a coach you've interviewed multiple times, maybe an athlete that keeps heading into the spotlight, so you want to keep grabbing interviews with them, fielding information. Maybe you're trying to write a longer sports journalist thing about a certain athlete. So sitting next to them in the interview, maybe a shoulder or arm touch, just saying, hey, good job, I'm so excited to talk to you, etc., whatever that may be. So applying these in an interview, again, could be any of these things. Now, it's probably not going to be super touchy personal because they probably just finished playing a game. You probably don't want to be in their space just as much as they don't want you in their space. But again, the basic handshake, a shoulder tap, any of those things maybe just shows that nonverbals are welcoming that interview, the good energy, and being able to get good content for your sports journalist.
So another subtopic we have is taking notes during your interview. Note taking is a critical skill when you're conducting your interview. We're going to have a slide on this in a moment, but I wanted to introduce it here. The Judy Brownell listening model. Taking notes promotes active listening, and throughout the course of an interview in general, and especially like taking notes, you'll see like portions of this model come into effect. We found a quote on one of our sources that I kind of liked from Bob Lipa of the Suffolk Times. He's a sports editor. A quote he had was, "Taking notes is an important part of the journalist's job, and different reporters handle it differently." So that just like sheds light on the fact that like everyone has a different way of taking notes, but it doesn't change the fact it's an important thing to do during your interview. To further elaborate, one thing I wanted to stress was focusing on a content-oriented approach to your notes in your interview is important. For example, another approach you can take is people-oriented, but that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for the sports journalism world. You know, we love our athletes and, you know, we love our other people, but, you know, we don't need to know about, you know, them and what they're up to. We need to know what they've done in the game, what their team's doing, what they did on the court or on the field. The people-oriented approach would be more appropriate for a social worker, for example. And let me see here one more thing. You also want to learn how to paraphrase. And when you take notes in a lecture or an interview, it's a similar idea. You want to be able to effectively paraphrase your notes. You can't write word for word necessarily what your athlete just told you. You're going to get lost, and it's just a skill you're going to have to sharpen and enhance throughout your experience. Thank you. So here we have a listening model. I just wanted to put it here to illustrate it. All of these stages are part of the interview process, and taking notes, they're really important. You hear what the athlete's saying during your interview, and you're going to have to paraphrase that and get that down. You have to understand what they're saying. You have to remember what they're saying and remember what's important, what their emotion was. You have to remember all these, details and enhance that skill. You have to interpret and evaluate and respond. That goes back to where I don't believe we discussed it yet, but we're going to have to create a comfortable atmosphere. So you respond and make a casual conversation with your athlete. That makes the interview go more smoothly, and you're better at your job. Professional dressing. Our textbook says it's a critical skill in nonverbal communication, and I think that's very true. Some people might not like this, but how you dress and present yourself, you have to put effort into it because it matters. It's going to change how people perceive you. We have an example of people dressed professionally here. You don't have to necessarily be in an interview setting, a completely flawless business, style, but you have to look nice, For example, probably appropriate is somewhere in between that picture and what I'm wearing. You definitely don't want to wear, I have Crocs on, I have a hat on, I threw a shirt on. So I guess the best way to put it is somewhere in between that and what I'm doing right now is, where you're going to want to put effort into how you dress, because it's going to advance your career and it's going to make a good impression, and that's what you want. Another thing real fast we wanted to include is the William Herbert Sheldon somatotyping scale. This is just kind of the fact that your body physique and how you look will affect how people perceive you as well. Generally, people are going to perceive you better if you're in better shape. And so, it might seem like a weird thing to include, but it's true, and this is true for any career and any avenue in life. You might want to just look into being the best version of yourself, dressing nice, and being in good shape and being healthy. So these are all things that I can work on. But yeah, that's all we got for this subtopic.
Heading into, once again, another subtopic, we have listening. And for our theory here, we're focusing in on the David Engle directionality theory, which basically interviewing would have dialogue. This type of conversation involves a two-way conversation where each member in the interaction exchanges, answers, and is engaged in the conversation to eventually build a relationship. We've all been in one-way conversations before, very awkward, very uncomfortable. So having that two-way conversation, you're going to form that relationship, even if for an interview, a short time. It may be 30 seconds to 3 minutes, but in those 30 to 3 minutes, you want to have that good conversation to make that good content. And most of the time, people do interact with you, especially professional athletes. They're trained in interviewing. They know how to talk to people, and most of the time, who doesn't love to talk about themselves? So listening can be here with dialogue, because we are also in charge of listening and staying engaged to form an appropriate response. Which leads us into our next topic of hearing versus listening. Now you may automatically think they're the same thing, but they aren't. We can think of a child here. They're hearing you when you discipline them, but are they listening to you of what they're saying? Or you may be telling your friend, significant other, and they say, oh, I'm hearing you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're listening to you, being engaged, forming a response, and being able to reciprocate what you just said to them. If they can repeat it back to you, there's a good chance that they're listening. But hearing refers to hearing different sounds, while listening means to actively taking in information and processing it, which I just said, and this is a very important distinction because, again, it's very obvious when it's a one-way conversation. Someone's just hearing, not very engaged, but listening, you feel that energy, you get that conversation, etc. So where can we see this? In our training, in our sports journalism field here, listening to an athlete you are interviewing is super important. To teach these concepts, we could have learners interview each other and probably listen to details. A good exercise you can do within yourself if you're trying to improve interviewing or just talking to people in general is being able to have that conversation and saying, this is what you said, here's what I heard, and then respond to them. So if you're struggling with that interview or even trying to build some time into the interview if you don't know exactly how to answer, you can always show that you're listening, being like, hey, you just asked me this question, whatever it may be, this is my response. And then how can we apply this? Again, just be sure to be active in listening to others when doing your job, as listening is a skill that's very often utilized, especially in such a high-intensity environment. Sports are high energy, it's happening fast, the athlete might be needed in 4 different places at once. You need to grab their attention fast, show that you're engaged, get the content you need, and then be done with the interview. So finally, just concluding everything, the couple different subtopics we talked about. We talked about asking questions, creating a comfortable atmosphere, taking notes, professional dressing, and listening. Now this can go for athletes, coaches, whoever may be on that team. You have to keep in mind that you're going to have to adjust your communication to who you're talking to. Younger athletes, you may want to update yourself on what's going on, especially in their terms and slang. Now, not necessarily using that the whole interview because, again, that kind of lacks professional intelligence of what's going on. But, again, you just need to apply these concepts to what you're doing. Adjust accordingly. These aren't textbook concrete, but it gives you a good idea of what to expect when you're going into this field. Some theories and concepts we mentioned were uncertainty reduction, directionality, somatotyping scale by Judy Brunel, the listening model, and some nonverbals. Now, as you can see, there's a lot more sports journalism than what meets the eye. It seems very similar to everyday interviewing, but of course, everything's going to have a touch of its own. Once you get on the field, you realize what you need, what to adjust, what works well for you, and what doesn't work well for you. So again, don't take these as concrete stone to heart, but again, gives you a good idea of what you're getting into, especially if you're interested in sports, writing, interviewing, talking, whatever that may be. So just here we have a link for you if you want to test your interview skills. Take it. Again, don't take it to heart. This may just be a good thing for you to be like, you know, here's where I can improve, here's what I already do good in, etc. But that's all we have for you.
Thanks for watching.
Here is our reference list. We have Indeed, interview prep. We have our textbook from our class. A couple just different articles. This was probably mentioned. I believe you did it in your your professional dressing. And then just some other things, just where I pulled like nonverbals, etc. But mainly our textbook is where we get most of our references.
This game, Michael Jordan making his way here outside of the locker room, and boy, I'll tell you what, traditionally, the Bucks have always given you guys a tough game in Milwaukee. Is there a reason why?
I think it's so close, you know, it's such a rivalry that they're just...
Third time in 5 years. I know all rings are great. Is this one the most satisfying based on where you were, losing 5 of 8 at one point in the regular season?
1,000%. I mean, just...
This wraps up the 7-game road trip. Are you excited to finally get back to the United Center and play in front of the hometown fans?
I don't know. I've been shooting the ball pretty well away from the court, but...
How important was experience to this journey this year?
It was extremely important. I mean...
Officials have had better nights than they had tonight, haven't they?
I'm not going to get fined. No way.
Thanks, MJ. Bulls win it tonight. Final score 107-104.
The clock is running down in OT. There's 3 seconds left. You guys didn't use a timeout. I'm looking at Mike Robb. I'm almost in tears. I'm like, what is going on? And then you run the play. Was there any panic? Or was Coach Reed just like, look, run the play. We're going for it now?
No,
What the prevailing thoughts coming into this day? You know it's your last day. In those first like 5 minutes, compared to what you're feeling maybe now. So take us through the emotions of the day.
I think the biggest thing is, you know, coming.
Mike, overcome with emotion is exactly how I would describe LeBron's reaction as he shares a hug with Kyrie. We'll get in a minute, but he is still crying tears of joy. LeBron.
I'm sorry, Doris.
No worries, Kyrie. LeBron, as soon as that buzzer sounded, your emotions let loose. Can you describe what you're feeling right now?
I set out a goal 2 years.
You knew it was going to be a tough task, but did you feel like there was anything that you guys didn't do well executing-wise, or was it more that they just kind of played a better game?
honestly, like, you know, I didn't think there was anything we didn't do that we could have to really help ourselves. I mean,
LeBron, you did what no other team had been able to do, coming back from a 3-1 deficit in the finals. And to do that, you had to win twice in a place that proved too much for so many teams. What did you find in Game 5 here?
Just locked in.
Caitlin, what did you think of Ravens' defense?
yeah, I thought she defended well. I thought they all defended well. I thought they pressured the ball well. When you get to this point in the tournament, everybody's defense is good, no matter what. But yeah, I thought it was good.
Deficit, this is special.
We'll see you in a few minutes on the podium.
All right,
LeBron.
thank you,
Mike.